Okay, just to remind you of the procedure for analyzing a issue. I like to call them dilemmas, but it's not always a dilemma. Sometimes it's just, hey, what should the rule be about a particular thing? And that's the thing that we call a policy. So it's, although in this class we talk about dilemmas, that's just because it's usually more interesting to talk about, hey, we got a conflict. What's the answer to the conflict? Just talking about, well, what should the policy be about using of your swipe card? It's a little less interesting. So the dilemma is only for the reason of making it a little more exciting to discuss. And of course, hearing your opinion, and of course, modeling civilized discussion, which I think sadly is fallen by the wayside. Knowing how to actually have a civilized discussion as you discuss something, or even look at a policy or discuss a policy maybe you don't agree with. How would you approach changing it? Well, if you're known to be someone that is can discuss it in a civilized manner, you will probably be heard, and your opinion will count to those people that actually make decisions. They see that you're a reasonable person, and that's what I'm hoping you'll find is, as you have an opinion, in your expressing of it, in promoting it, convincing others, you will do that in a civilized manner. Because remember, you're sometimes it's about winning the debate. If you're in a debate club, you want to win the argument. But really, if you actually want your opinion to matter more, you want to convince people of your side. You want to convince people, not just win the argument. You want to get them to agree with your side of things. And it may come to be some mundane thing about what computer do I get to use. Something more critical to the organization of, do we do business in this area? Do we do business with this country, or do we provide this product? Or do we comply with this rule, and how do we comply properly? It all comes down to you having a position. Now remember, when we're looking at dilemmas, if we're deciding on a particular thing, or a discussion of a policy, you got to identify, what decision do we make? And then ethically analyze, what is the majority would feel have the greatest benefit? What is the virtue ethic of what would be right and wrong about this particular thing? Are we treating people right? Are we doing the right thing, keeping contracts? And of course, you got to know the laws around it, because you need to comply with the laws. And that's a very pragmatic part of it. Yeah, even if I don't agree with it, if I break this law, we're in trouble. So the pragmatic approach would be, well, we got to obey the law, or we'll be fined. Even if, and then on the ethical side, you say, I don't agree with that. I'm going to work at changing the law. But pragmatic side says, well, right now, here's the law. If you don't obey it, your company's going to be fined, or you'll suffer consequences. So when we talk about the ethics, it's also about knowing what the laws are out there, changing the laws. You have to convince people of the reason to make a change, or to either to cancel or modify. So when you're talking about the ethics, remember, there's those various approaches. Think about not so much, well, can it be done technically, like what's the most efficient algorithm, but more, is it, when we do this, is it hurting people? Is it projecting our company in a bad way? Does it appear to be callous and uncaring for some? Or is it actually harming some innocent? That's where that second dilemma was, the 0-day exploit. And many of you wrote about the possible harm it could do, and you don't want to be involved with that. And that's the ethical reason behind that. One part of that is also, do you trust who you're doing the work for to only use it against those that want to do harm? And again, that falls in the matter of trust of who you're possibly working for. Can you put conditions on your fine work? Remember if you're doing any research on a particular topic, or you want to come up with, what should I write about this particular topic? It's great to start with, what are the current laws around that topic? Because that's going to come up in a policy with your company. regardless of what you think is right, what are the existing laws so you know some background of, well, even if I have my opinion of what should be done, what are the laws on that particular topic? The one of cameras, hidden cameras. What are the laws about hidden cameras? I think if you look, you'll find out at least there should be notification at the doors of the building, there are cameras in use. You don't have to say, here's where they are. But legally, from my understanding, is if you notify people with signs right in prominent places, there are cameras in use, your activity is being monitored, that complies with notifying people of this idea of expectation of privacy. What's the reason for that? One is if you find some activity that you need to fire someone for, unless they know of their expectation of privacy, you may not be able to enforce or fire them. They may be able to come back to you with a lawsuit. You didn't tell me these cameras are in use, that there was monitoring happening. Therefore, that evidence has to be suppressed, and therefore you don't have a case. So the laws around it, so you can show that you're doing due diligence as you may need to be involved in litigation. Hopefully it doesn't come down to that. There's a whole theory of behavior of people. If they know they might be watched, they will behave better. Well, guess what? You're on the internet. Somebody is watching you. Your privacy is very transparent. You may think you're more private than you really are, but just be super careful about that as an individual for your own protection and for your company. I can see where I can, go to your ISP and watch where your employees are visiting, even without decrypting all the messages. That's a whole another topic of that was the whole privacy chapter. As you think about a topic, again, you can do research on what other people's opinions are, as long as you cite those sources. And many people have very good explanations that you can start with and say, I agree with this person on this point. And you've cited that person. And I think you'll find that it's easier to write about, here's what someone said and here's what I agree with. You don't have to come up with your own complete policy, unless you like to write like that. But I'd say it's easier to say, here's what so-and-so said about this, and here's the part that I agree with what they said. And cite it, and you won't be accused of plagiarism. And of course, put it in an organized manner. So when you're looking for what others say about it, you can look for the ethics of or policies of this particular topic. Okay, I'm going to jump ahead to the middle of chapter 10 because we've talked about the various dilemmas, some of the current events, but I wanted to get it started on this page right here. Why this class? And I've challenged you a lot with just thinking about right and wrong, thinking about ethics of things. But it's really not an ethics class as much as an ethics in technology class. So why do we care about ethics related to technology? You're going to get a job somewhere. I'm guessing you're all going to get a pretty good job. Technology is a good field to be in. First thing you're going to have to do when you get hired is you will be signing an employment agreement. In that employment agreement is acknowledgement of, I agree with all these policies. You'll have agreed that you've read them or will comply with them. So your first encounter with any sort of policy regarding rules about the employment will be that first employment agreement. Some you'll have a non-disclosure. Going to do some research in some intellectual property. If you're doing anything high level, usually college students aren't right away. You've got a little background check, little check to see how good a worker you are. Can you work? You're competent. Along the way, they may, as they get into more secretive stuff, have a non-disclosure agreement. Usually they bring that right up front, that, hey, you might be doing some research, sign this now. Some companies may have a renewal of that each year. The most time I've seen non-disclosure agreements is when I'm working with contractors. And you want to work with a contractor, they have to sign that non-disclosure agreement. That may be you. You may be a contractor. And sometimes contractors can make a lot more than the actual permanent employees. Speaking of, this chapter on contingent workers, we saw the video about, I call those the lower level packers at FedEx and Walmart. Contingent workers there, I'd say, aren't as treated as humanely, like that guy that he saw safety issues. Well, there's 100 people waiting for your job. See you later. But software contractors, IT contractors, if you build up the expertise in a specific area like cybersecurity or compliance policies, you can be a good paid consultant if you show skills in that area. And I think you might actually enjoy it. I've heard of people that have worked for a company. The company was laying off people. They retired, came back as a consultant, make double the salary because consultants can charge more. Part of the reason is consultants have to pay for their own benefits. Remember the benefits part? Your company, the benefits may actually be equal to your salary because some companies have really decent benefits. If you become a contractor, you can say, hey, look, I'm getting a big check. Oh, but I've got to pay $4,000 a month for health insurance, or it's hefty. Pension, retirement, I got to put away. Think of that if you get into contracting. But it is, if you're good, you can pay well. So as a contractor, you agree with that non-disclosure agreement. As an employer, you have to agree with policies. Okay, policies are involved in an ethical decision. There's ethics behind the policies. Not only knowing the policies, knowing the laws behind them, again, to comply with your own, not being charged with something illegal, and knowing what is applying to your company that you're working for. What laws apply to this particular work, the responsibility of software. Remember the whole software contract? Your software works as needed. It's in a critical area where people could be hurt if it doesn't work. Guess what? You're more liable if something goes wrong. So knowing the laws around things. And then as you get more experience, as you work with that, you have to confirm, are you complying with the laws, with the policies of every company that should be complying with the laws? So you're going to have to not only know the laws, but then abide by them. And the problem with abiding with policies is there are people that are rule keepers. And you've probably seen some of those. You may be one of those that, hey, here's the rule. Okay, I'll follow it. No questions. But most people, even to comply when they intend to, if they don't agree with a particular policy, it's hard for them to comply with it. Unconsciously, they're going to kind of ignore that and not pay attention to it, and even forget the policy because when they first heard it, it's like, that doesn't make sense. In their mind, they might even be purposely doing it. If it doesn't make sense in your mind of, hey, this doesn't seem right, it's easy for your mind just to forget about that and not comply. So having ethical reasons behind, well, here's why we keep this policy. Most irritating one to me, I think, is the expiring password. All right, you've got to change that password. Oh man, I've got to make up a new password, and now I've got 10 more, 10 of the other 10. Do I go and change it on those other ones to go with my new one? Of course, writing it down is a tendency, right? Change the password, and you've seen some people who pick up their keyboard, there's 10 passwords. Or like my father, he had a paper with all of his passwords to all these bank accounts and things sitting right there out in the open. My brother, I think, helped to keep that in a special file rather than just sitting right out there in the open. Anyone that came to help, there's all his password. They could have just easily snapped a picture, and a few months later, a few dollars missing from that bank account. That password protection, there's a lot of ethics behind that, right? Changing that password. Security for you, security for your employer. Remember, your password isn't just keeping your data secure. If you're working for someone, the data you're working on If someone can get into that because you have had a weak password or not changed it, you become liable, and your company may, be damaged because some information got out. So there's the pragmatic reasons, right? I just mentioned pragmatic reasons that, secure information can get out. Your company can be damaged. You could lose sales. There's virtue behind that of the value of privacy of valuing your own privacy, and the ownership of that intellectual property. Who owns that? Well, the people that did the work, they should own that. That's theirs, and that falls down to more of a principle of ownership, not as pragmatic. Now, after you have policies, someone's going to say, hey, you're good in security. Can you put software on our firewall to verify that we're complying? We're auditing. We need to know, are there employees that are visiting places past their breaks or using equipment questionably that would raise suspicion that maybe we need to monitor more specific activity? Auditing comes in often in your intrusion detection systems, your IDS. Your intrusion prevention systems is more of a preventing the auditing logs from filling up with lots of extraneous stuff. But you may be involved in auditing as you gain experience knowing the laws and how to audit. That's where part of pen testing is. Basically, it's like the security guard checking the door. He's auditing the physical security when the security guard comes and checks the doors. In technology, you will be auditing. The firewalls are auditing the traffic for compliance with, first of all, traffic is, there's not malware getting through and attacking you, but it also can be used to audit the traffic coming down. If at morning there's always a huge spike in downloads that isn't malware, what's going on? Is it worth auditing, confirming, especially if it's affecting the performance of the network for everyone else? There's plenty of reasons for auditing. And especially when someone marches in and say, we suspect you of doing this, show us your audit logs. And if you don't have those audit logs, guess what? You're going to have to produce a lot of work, or you actually may be penalized for not having the auditing. You need to be confirming that you're following, or you know the policy. And then this gets harder, enforcing the policy, enforcing that password expiration, and finding someone that has broken the policy. This is where it comes in. If you actually need to prosecute, ask someone to resign or fire them, big time lawsuits can happen if you're not following the stated policies. Most of the time, if you're working for a company, your company is more liable than you personally. But depending on your involvement, you could be personally on that list with a pink slip if someone else did something, you did not catch them when you should have been auditing. Someone else finds out they were doing this illegal activity. You're out the door along with them because you weren't enforcing the policies that you said were in place. That's kind of scary because you feel like you're more innocent. You're doing your best to install a firewall, keep it up to date. Yet along comes something I realized, hey, we messed up. We missed that particular part of auditing. And then here comes in more ethical reasons. As you see policies that need changing, and this is the big problem with the law part. The laws and regulations I'd say are a good 10 years behind the actual technology. The actual laws on the papers, because it just takes so long to make the laws, for people to agree to it, for the lawyers to argue about the wording. Much of the time, the laws are interpreting technology rules way back in the 80s, applying to something today. It's a huge problem. And this is where you, as the new to technology, fresh with the knowledge, can come up with revisions that are needed to apply to the current technology. Smartphones and the use of bring your own device. I'd say the laws on the books are pretty fuzzy. Maybe that's something that you could actually address in your paper. What should a particular law be about texting, having a phone, being able to text, and enabling cameras on smartphones? Easiest rule is say no phones. It's easier to say you have a phone or not, we can tell. But when you do have a phone in your pocket, it's a little harder to monitor what's happening with that. And many companies, especially security conscious, it's no phones in. You turn them in, and they monitor the radio frequencies, watching are their devices trying to connect, and honeypots, wireless honeypots set up to help capture that. I've even heard where they can tell if someone in the parking lot is trying to connect wirelessly to things. There's things like that to monitor. So revision of the policies. And perhaps if you like the writing and establishing policies, or you get experience, you may be actually authoring those policies. So your involvement is going to be, at the very least, agreement to some policy when you're hired and compliance with it. The auditing, enforcement, revision, and authoring. If you're into security, you're likely going to have to be involved in those firewalls that are auditing, and you're going to be expert at the snort logs, at the system logs of the firewall, and part of that is verifying that anything's going on. Mostly malware attacks from the outside, but auditing of compliance with policies. I remember once we put a MRTG. It's a software that you can put on a firewall that monitors all the sites being visited. And lo and behold, there was one person that spiked really high. I don't know if it was Netflix or something. It's like, that seems rather odd that all the traffic, like it was like half the traffic of the entire network out of 200 people, 300 people on the network. That was the main traffic, that one person. That auditing just brought up immediately, what's this person doing? And realized they were just watching Netflix all day. There was one guy, he was downloading I think it was actually illegal. He was downloading movies to his local PC so he could serve them to the network and save the bandwidth. Well, he was using up all the bandwidth downloading all these movies, and there was a little legal issue with that. Some of them are legal to download. That's something that you pay attention to. If it seems innocent, but remember, if you're working for a company using their network to do that, there's a little more interest in them because they're a bigger target for someone to come after, saying, hey, wait a minute, you're downloading this stuff. Your ISP sees what you're downloading. And I don't know if UD gets it in the IT. I haven't talked to I don't know people in IT. But our IT guy at MS, a couple times a year, we'll get a notice from our ISP. Here's a site we know some illegal videos have been, or cracked videos or copyrighted material has been downloaded. We'll get that notification. It's like, well, when did it? I'm not sure if they get when it exactly happened. That's when we might have to go back to our auditing, because we don't want to be hit. We're a smaller target than UD, but UD's a smaller target than Harvard or MIT. I can imagine the kind of compliance they have to monitor. And it gets kind of annoying. You have that software that has to be installed before they let you on the network. That's all part of this compliance. Okay, so back to the final topic in the chapter of dealing with outsourcing. Now, this may be you, right? You may be the contractor that they are outsourcing to. And think about the policies about using outsourced workers, those contingent workers. They have specific expertise. It's generally a longer term. It's often a 6-month contract, but it could be an indefinite contract. Why do companies do that? Well, of course, there's the pragmatic reasons of lower cost, flexibility. The market goes up, we can hire more. If we lose, it's harder to give someone a pink slip than say, well, your contract is up, we're not renewing. So the person doing the contracting is a little less stable, but again, that's part of the pay, is because you're at a higher risk job, you can ask for a little higher salary, but you have to use it for your own benefits, paying for benefits and things. And having your core staff, the people that are permanent, focus on your core mission. And that gets back to the company having a clear core mission for everyone in the company. The people on the fringes, those outsourced people, aren't as much in on the core competencies, unless the staff are not very loyal because they're not paid as well or treated as well. So as a boss, you want to value your staff to keep them in your company, and because the bottom line, people should be valued regardless of the work they bring. Every human being has value. Now, not only in-house or contractors or in the country, offshore outsourcing is a big deal now. And you have to know the laws regarding outsourced workers in the foreign countries. There's culture differences in what they consider ethical or not in their work for you. Sometimes it's a lower cost of living. Sometimes there's a glut of skills in a particular area, so you can have lower costs in obtaining people with those skills. And it may be just easier, again, the ethical question, it's easier to they may have less strict rules about treatment of people over there. So this gets a little fuzzy. The business environment may be easier to find, but maybe more cutthroat in terms of how they treat people. But I guess there's a little one layer away in the outsourcing. You leave it to the organization how they treat their employees. Now that can come back to bite you, right? Some companies, they say, wait a minute, your products are produced in sweatshops in a particular country. That can come back to hurt a company. If they're big enough, I don't know if Nike was accused of that, but some of the big time manufacturers, typically clothing, it came back to say, wait a minute, who's making these shoes, or who's making this clothing for you? And they trace it back, sometimes for political reasons, sometimes just it hit the list of, hey, we found people being mistreated, trace it back to what companies are supporting these sweatshops where people are very low quality working conditions. That gets back to the ethical view of that. Again, back to the benefits of offshore outsourcing is, bottom line, cost savings. And that's going to affect you in your technology area. I've said it a few times, make sure you have a skill that can't be outsourced. Someone has to look at whether they should outsource a particular skill. No matter how good you are, well, if you're better, it's less chance that they will outsource. So keep your skills up and keep in mind where people are looking to outsource, make them have a good reason to not outsource you, either because of your integrity, your reliability, your knowledge of the company. That's just the way life is going to be for technology, because outsourcing is so attractive, especially as the cost of living is lower in other countries. Now, the advantage to you is as they outsource, guess what happens in those foreign countries? The cost of living goes up, and eventually their cost is closer to your cost as they demand higher pay because they can, because of economic issues. You may become more competitive, but initially outsourcing hurts the higher paying countries because there's hey, I can outsource this. And of course, the whole ethics behind that. Should you be loyal to people in your country? Will they be more loyal to you? Pragmatic view. And the idealistic view, should I just patronize those that are, you made in the US? That comes down to a principle. Pragmatically, lower costs, I'm going to be hiring them. Different time zones let you have 24/7 support. I remember a system that was down. I was handed off to Europe as it came to around supper time, handed off to Europe, and then handed off to someone in either, I think it was India, and then finally about 20 hours later, I had someone come back with a solution for my problem. But it was a long time system down issue with an HP system. Now, of course, as those outsourcing, as the cost of living increases in those countries, the cost advantage starts to go away. You have to spend time working and communicating to that offshore vendor and developing a good working relationship. That we want good workers. Here's our policies of how we expect our workers to interact with customers. Having that good relationship that, hey, you know, things are getting tough next month. We might be cutting back, but we like you. When economy kicks up, we're coming back, and they'll have workers ready for you. Here's a big issue. Domestic staff, those in the country, you're going to be laying some of them off. A lot of the reasons that you'll hear from the politicians is, well, they need to go back to school and learn more skills. They needed to retire anyway. They can go work in this particular area. It's not always that easy, but yeah, that is a hit, laying off domestic staff. And depending on how many you lay off, your company may become a target for protests or concerns and change in policy. There's conflicts, chance for conflicts because of language and misunderstanding just due to language differences. Where's your customer? You know, you're in the cloud. Could there be a security issue with customer data? Remember, the value of that customer data and the loss of it can shut down your company. There was one company, but they lost one tape of like probably 100 backup tapes. They got to the storage area and there was one missing. And I don't know if someone did a typo that they really hadn't lost one, but somewhere along the line, one tape was lost that had the database of all the customers. What did they have to do? The law say within 30 days, they have to report it if they haven't resolved the issue and inform all those customers that were on that database. And there may be just some tape that maybe it was never lost, or it's just, you know, fell behind somebody's desk and they may discover it later, but they had to report it because they didn't know where it was. That can be a huge hit on your company. And the whole dependency on foreign workers for IT infrastructure. That again is a challenge that's going to be a political issue for a long time. And as the internet kind of makes it a global economy, you just have to, it's just going to be a fact of life that IT is available across the internet, and so your skills are competing with that. Now, to do successful offshore outsourcing, again, you may be involved in working with outsource. Well, if you show the ability to work with outsource and help them keep the project going and understand the technology, being someone who can speak the native language or at least understand and communicate, you'll be a valuable person on this side, the project management. And you need to have plenty of staff available as your needs change. This is something that COVID has forced us into, state-of-the-art telecommunications. I mean, this book was written, I think 5 years ago, before any of the, hey, everyone needs Zoom or Team or Meet. And communications, it's probably 3 months before people got on board of figuring out, Zoom was not shutting down halfway into the conversation. People bumped up their network speed so they could actually have a decent conversation. And then you've got to have managers on site to make sure that the work is being done. And of course, dealing with remote workers. I think that's a huge thing coming up with security. Someone's connecting in, they're talking about intellectual property. How hard would it be for someone to tap into a Zoom or a Google Meet meeting? I'm thinking there's lots of vulnerabilities there that people are still discovering. And that may be something that you could be involved with, is finding and doing pen testing on can people break into a meeting and or somehow monitor that, decrypt it. Even without all the video, could you simply catch the audio stream and do voice to text and have a transcript that gets fed off to your database, keeping track of what they're talking about. Maybe we need to get into that area, or maybe we can steal secrets from that company. You may be involved in just monitoring. Could that be happening to you? Are your security keys being updated? The whole compliance and prevention of that happening to you, your company. Now, whistleblowing is, I find it kind of interesting. People talk about whistleblowing, but there's actually real laws on the book about whistleblowing and what it actually means. Goes way back to fraud during the Civil War. That if you find something that your company or someone is doing to negligent, illegal, unethical, abusive, or dangerous act by any organization, there is some protection of whistleblowers, and I think we've seen some more rules, but there is always the chance that whistleblower will be retaliated against. And so anonymous whistleblowing is usually the approach that a lot of people take. You can't make false claims about companies, but if it is true, unethical, or dangerous things that you have protected, there is compensation to whistleblower. That's the whole motivation for whistleblowing is we want to keep dangerous or unethical or illegal activity from happening. If whistleblowing is one way to stop that, we want to protect the whistleblowers. One term that came up is when you file a claim, it's like for the good of all kind of thing. You're filing a claim in the name of the king is what that means, but you're basically filing it for the good of all is essentially the bottom line for whistleblowers. Some that receive government funds, if there are government funds associated with it, there's, I guess, a little more strength in the rules because the government has so much money to be stolen that there's laws in place. Look at what kind of recovery you could get. If there is a certain damage, you could get 15 to 30% of the recovery. When we're talking big money, that's quite a motivation for a whistleblower. So again, compensation to whistleblowers to stop abusive or dangerous activity. That's the key, Tom, just kind of a little trivia on the side. It means suing for the sake of the king or on behalf of the king. Okay, so the basic rules for whistleblowers are that they can't be fired if they fall under the category of whistleblower, and they can apply as a jury trial if there's retaliation, fired, and if the firing is because of their whistleblowing. And remember, whistleblowing falls under, they were stopping unethical activity. That has to be the case, not that they just were an unhappy worker. And again, motivation or incentive for them to come forward is they're compensated not beyond just the damages, but with punitive. Punitive damage means you fine them more than what it cost you. You get punitive compensation. So you say, okay, say you lost your house. We'll pay you for your house, and we pay you double for your house as part of punitive compensation for the people they shouldn't have taken your house away in the first place. So punitive versus just paying for the damage that was done to you. So punitive damages can be even way more than the initial cost. Yeah, you cost me $1, but you shouldn't have done that. Fine you $1,000, and I get a compensation for that, for the punitive damage. So what does a whistleblower, the responsibility of a whistleblower, if you actually see unethical or illegal activity, you can't just run to the government right away and say, I'm a whistleblower. You have to show that there was some documentation, some evidence of the ignoring of the laws. And this is the hard one, that you did show an attempt to address the problem internally. You told your boss, we shouldn't be dumping those chemicals into the river. Either an anonymous letter that you can document that got to the boss, or some document that showed that this was brought up, the company knew about it. And this is the part that I'd say is something that I don't know if it's happened with real whistleblowers. How, and you know, a lot of it's hidden in the whole lawsuit part. But that's a big part of it. If they actually had to show some attempt to address it, they just didn't run it right away. Oh yeah, you spilled a gallon of that chemical. I'm going to tell the government. Did you approach to say, was that an error? Were we supposed to know about that? Did we know it was poisonous? Who let this guy grab this bucket and just dump it here? All that. Can you show that there you addressed it, and even, you know, through proper channels, say, no, wait a minute, that was an accident. We're cleaning that up. We're admitting to it. You're running right to the government or to whistleblower. You know, say you're a whistleblower. You may not get the compensation of a whistleblower because you did not follow the expected process. If you decide to go through with being a whistleblower, imagine the pain that they may go through. They have to decide on a plan. There's a big dilemma. They know that there will be consequences. Even if they don't fire you, you think that there might be a little unfriendliness at work if they knew you were the whistleblower. But again, back to your ethical position, was the whistleblowing activity dangerous, harmful, illegal, that was causing harm? I'd say smart whistleblowers had to think through that, and because of either their ethical stance or they wanted to be able to sleep at night with their conscience, they had to come forward with that. It's a big challenge. Now, I hope you not have to be involved with that, because it can be really shake up your life kind of thing. There's some whistleblowers became famous, but I'd say most of them, they got compensation and had retaliatory actions. Maybe they just had a new life somewhere else. But there are consequences for that. It's a scary thing. But depending on what they've stood up for, I'd say, you know, that was very, you know, beneficial to me because someone did a whistleblowing act way back. Remember the whistleblower, as far as I know, he did the right process. The guy that said these O-rings are not going to survive in the cold. We should not be launching. It seemed to me that he did all the right things, from what I understand. He reported it, expressed his concern. He was an expert in a particular area. He brought it to the right people. They chose to take the risk, and then the Challenger exploded. Even though he had done what seemed to me the right thing, he still had guilt. I don't know how it had a major effect on his life. I don't know if it drove him to early grave, but big effect on his life. But you'd think someone could say, wait a minute, guy, you did all the right things. Don't take that guilt on yourself. But I think it was just such a big thing. He couldn't let go of it. So for Tuesday, we'll be kind of doing a review of everything, discussing ideas for your for that last paper. I think you'll find if you do it in a policy approach to something in technology, it could be a great thing to have at an interview or on your resume. Here, this class, I discussed this particular IT dilemma or a policy that I think should take place, and showing that you know laws and can defend a particular position on something in a nice organized way. I think, especially if it's related to like an IT policy that people are still struggling with, bring your own device, cloud compliance, privacy, decrypting messages, zero-day attacks. If you want to dig into that more, that's your choice. Pick something that's interesting to you, or if it's not interesting, but you find it's kind of easy to write about, there's a lot of information. I'm more looking for a well-organized argument showing understanding of laws and the ethics behind them. So if it's your own opinion, that makes it easier for you to write. I'm not judging you on your opinion, but on your logical reasoning through an ethical issue. All right, have a great day. Hope you have a great weekend. Fire off any emails if you want me to like if you have a draft, I'm happy to look at drafts. Have a great day. And this is recorded, so I will end the recording. It'll show up in the chat.